What's up, guys? Christian Retro Lover 4 again, back again with another review. So today, me and Big Fella went to go see 28 Years Later, and holy shit, do I have a lot of emotions about it. So, and feelings about it, what I mean. So for starters, I think this is very different from the first two movies. Like, if you're binge watching the first two movies before you go see this, just to let you know, this is a very different movie. Like, not in terms of like cinematography, because I actually think it kind of nails some of the shots of like the original two, and I think they even used iPhones during this movie. Which,
that they did.
Yeah, if you remember 28 Days Later, they used like the first digital cameras, which is why it kind of has like a crappy like tone or just quality to it, especially if you try to watch it on a more high def TV. But that's kind of the charm of it, and I think that's what this movie kind of has a little bit of it too. But there are a few like modern shots and even modern music moments, but the soundtrack was very great, especially towards the beginning where they were making some of the shots and cuts like the trailer, with the Boots poem and with the like old war footage that shows kind of like the parallel between the island and and like just how the old like war never changes tone. And I do like how this movie kind of it takes a step back from like the military aspects of the first two movies, and instead brings in more like a cult / village,
Survival.
I would say. Yeah, survival aspects, which reminds me of the Walking Dead, kind of like in the All Out War arc, which was like season 7 through 9, where it's like they had this one village called the Kingdom and another one called the Saviors and stuff like that. So it was like human versus human, but also versus zombies. But thankfully, this one actually had a bunch of zombies, which, by the way, the infected in this movie were insane. Like, the makeup was insane, and like the gore was so over the top. I do not know how they were able to get away with like a simple R rating, because holy shit. And I really love the new Alpha zombie. It reminds me a lot of the bloater from The Last of Us, or like the I forget his name, but it was from Army of the Dead. And
I'm not sure if he was called the Alpha or the King. Not to mention, also, they kind of remind me of the Volatiles from Dying Light.
Right.
Even though they weren't stronger at night, they were still frickin' strong.
Yeah, that beginning where Aaron Taylor Johnson and his son Spike, when they're running away from that Alpha, that's what really reminded me of the Volatile. So the overall story, I don't think is half bad. It's really good and pretty emotional towards the end. The casting and acting is phenomenal. Like I said, Aaron Taylor Johnson, but also Ralph Fiennes, and I can't really think of any other big names I saw, but the kid actor was really good, and also the mother. It's also nice to know a little bit of what happened after 28 weeks later, since it takes place, of course, 28 years after the events of 20 weeks later, and it's mentioned how like the events that happened in Europe, they weren't really much as a big deal as we thought it was, and they were able to contain it and quarantine it, and so like countries like America, they're safer now, which is why instead of being in France or the US in this movie, we're instead in Scotland, right?
Yeah, it's in the Scottish Highlands.
Yeah. So overall, a fantastic movie, fantastic setting, fantastic makeup, fantastic editing that's really like the original, and it's like really great that Danny Boyle, like a little over 20 years later, because he didn't even direct 28 weeks later, but he was still able to bring the charm from both 28 Days Later and a little bit of 28 Weeks Later. So I think this is I'm gonna say 9 out of 10, but it's like, for me, kind of really close to an 8. So it's like an 8.5 out of 10.
I agree. That's a solid score. And the best part is we don't have to wait too long for the next one, because the next sequel is called I think it's called either just The Bone Temple or 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. But it is confirmed.
Right. So thankfully, we have a new series coming along. We don't have to wait another 20 years. And I do love these, like, speaking of which, I do love how horror movies, or just movies nowadays, they're doing, like, these reboot sequels where it obviously takes place years later, and they try to introduce the old people from those old movies, but, you know, they try to introduce some new people. I think we talked about it on the podcast a little bit with, like, Top Gun and stuff like that, but I also saw, like, the new I Know What You Did Last Summer, and, of course, Final Destination Bloodlines, which I still have to get to reviewing on my channel. Any more thoughts, big fella?
No, just say that, yeah, for all the movies that are coming out where sequels, reboots, and remakes are taking over everything, this was a well-deserved sequel, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Looking forward to the next one, too. So I really recommend you check it out if you're a big fan of zombies, horror, gore, over the top, you know, stuff like that. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Peace.